He thought she was weak. The bell above the diner door chimes softly as the late afternoon light spills across cracked tile floors, dust floating in the golden air like something suspended between moments. And at the center of it all sits Emily Carter, quiet as ever, shoulders relaxed, hands steady around a chipped white coffee mug, while across from her, a man in an expensive charcoal suit leans forward with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no, his voice low enough to sound polite, but sharp enough to cut through the room. "You should really be more careful who you ignore," he says, smiling without warmth. And a few customers glance over, then quickly look away, because everyone here knows his type, the kind who carries power like a shadow that stretches too far. But Emily doesn't react. Not the way people expect. No flinch, no apology, just a slow breath, her eyes lifting to meet his for the first time, calm, unreadable, like still water hiding depth. And under the small wooden table, unnoticed by most, lies a German shepherd, his coat a muted blend of sable and black, his body completely still except for the faint rise and fall of controlled breathing, ears slightly angled, listening, watching, waiting. The man chuckles, mistaking silence for submission. "I asked you a question." He presses, leaning closer now, the scent of expensive cologne cutting through the air. But Emily only sets her cup down with a soft click, the sound barely audible, yet somehow louder than his voice. And then her hand lowers, resting gently on the dog's neck, fingers brushing through thick fur, and for a second, nothing happens, just the hum of an old refrigerator, the distant clatter of dishes, the quiet rhythm of a place that has seen too many stories pass through unnoticed, until her fingers move, almost imperceptibly, a light tap. Then another, then a third, steady and deliberate. A signal so small it could be mistaken for nothing at all, but the dog's eyes open wider, amber, catching the light, focused now, locked onto the man across the table, and something shifts, not in the room, not yet, but in the air itself, like pressure building before a storm. You can't quite see. The man pauses mid-sentence, his smile flickering for just a fraction of a second, because instinct, the kind you can't buy or fake, is whispering something is wrong, but he doesn't understand what. Not yet. Not until the dog slowly rises to his feet without a sound, posture straight, controlled, presence suddenly undeniable, and Emily, she doesn't move, doesn't speak, doesn't need to, because the moment has already begun to turn, and the man who walked in thinking he owned the room is about to realize he never did. The room does not erupt. It tightens, like every breath is being held at once, the kind of silence that presses against your ears, and the man notices it now, not with his eyes but somewhere deeper, the way his fingers pause against the edge of the table, the way his jaw stiffens just slightly as the dog stands fully upright, not aggressive, not loud, just present, steady as a line drawn in sand that should not be crossed. And Emily keeps her hand resting lightly against the dog's neck, her posture unchanged, her gaze soft but unyielding, as if she has already seen how this moment ends and is simply waiting for it to arrive. "You think this scares me," the man says, but there is a thin crack in his voice now, something almost invisible but impossible to ignore, and he leans back half an inch, just enough to create distance, just enough to betray that instinct is beginning to speak louder than pride. And around them, the diner shifts in subtle ways. A waitress stops mid-step. A spoon clinks against porcelain somewhere in the back. A man by the window lowers his newspaper without realizing it. All of them sensing that something has changed even if they cannot name it. And then the sound comes, not loud, not sudden, but deliberate, the soft weight of boots against tile, measured, unhurried, each step landing with quiet certainty, and the man's eyes flick toward the entrance as two figures move into view. Uniforms pressed, posture straight, the kind of presence that does not need to announce itself, and one of them speaks, not to him, but past him. "Ma'am." The word lands gently, respectfully, and for the first time, the man turns. Fully, confusion overtaking the fading edge of arrogance, because he had not noticed them arrive, had not noticed anything beyond his own voice until now. And Emily finally exhales, a slow, controlled breath, as if releasing something she has been holding for a long time, and she nods once, small, almost imperceptible, But it is enough. The dog remains still at her side, eyes never leaving the man. And in that stillness there is something unmistakable, not threat, not chaos, but control, absolute and quiet, the kind that does not need to prove itself. And the man shifts again, this time more noticeably, his confidence unraveling thread by thread as realization begins to form, not yet complete, not yet understood, but close, dangerously close. And Emily's fingers brush once more against the dog's fur, not a signal now, just a touch, grounding, steady, as if reminding both of them why they are here. And when she finally speaks, her voice is calm, even, almost gentle. "You were right about one thing," she says, meeting his eyes without hesitation. "I do know exactly who I am dealing with." And the words do not rise, do not sharpen. They simply settle into the space between them, heavy with meaning. And for the first time since he walked in, the man has no immediate reply, because something deeper than words has already taken hold, something he cannot control, and the room, still silent, waits for what comes next. The man swallows, slow, controlled, as if buying himself time. But time is no longer something he owns, and he straightens his jacket with a practiced motion, trying to rebuild the version of himself that walked in minutes ago, the one who commanded rooms without effort. Yet his eyes betray him, flicking once toward the dog, then to the Marines, then back to Emily, searching for something he can still dominate, something he can still bend. "This is unnecessary," he says, forcing a small laugh. That does not reach his eyes. "I was just having a conversation." But the word conversation hangs in the air, hollow, exposed, and one of the Marines steps slightly forward, not aggressive, not confrontational, just present in a way that shifts the balance further. His voice calm, measured. "Sir, we are going to need you to step outside." And the request is simple, almost polite, yet it carries the kind of finality that does not invite negotiation, and the man hesitates, just a fraction too long. The kind of hesitation that reveals everything, because moments ago he would have refused outright, would have pushed back, would have reminded everyone who he was, but now, something unseen has already stripped that certainty away, and Emily watches him quietly. Her expression unchanged, though something softer flickers beneath the surface, not sympathy, not satisfaction, but something closer to closure, as if a long unfinished sentence is finally reaching its last word. And the dog remains beside her, steady, grounded, a silent witness to it all, his gaze never wavering. And then the man tries one last time, turning slightly toward Emily, lowering his voice. "You really think this changes anything?" he asks, the question almost pleading now, as if he can still rewrite the ending if he says the right thing. But Emily tilts her head just slightly, considering him for a brief second, and when she answers, her voice is softer than before, almost gentle. "No," she says, "this just reveals it." And the truth in those words lands heavier than anything else that has been said, because it is not a threat, it is not a challenge. It is simply the unveiling of something that has already been set in motion long before he walked through that door. And the man exhales, a quiet, defeated breath that he cannot quite hide. And this time, when the Marine gestures toward the exit, he moves, slowly at first, then with a reluctant acceptance, each step away from the table feeling heavier than the last, as if he is leaving behind more than just a conversation. And as he passes the threshold of the diner, the bell above the door chimes again, soft and ordinary, almost indifferent to what has just unfolded, and inside, the room begins to breathe again. The tension dissolving into murmurs, into movement, into life returning to its usual rhythm. But Emily does not move right away. She sits there for a moment longer, her hand resting on the dog's head, fingers tracing slow, familiar lines through his fur, and her eyes drift briefly to the window, watching the fading lights stretch across the parking lot. And in that quiet, there is something unspoken, something deeper than the moment itself, because this was never about a single man or a single threat. It was about something carried for a long time, something finally brought into the open. And as she finally stands, steady and composed, the dog rising with her in perfect sync, there is a sense, subtle but undeniable, that this is not the end of the story, only the moment where it truly begins. Outside, the air feels different, cooler, thinner, as if the world itself has stepped back to make room for what is unfolding. And the man stands near the edge of the parking lot, no longer framed by warm diner light, but by the fading gold of early evening, his confidence now reduced to small, restless movements, adjusting his sleeve, glancing toward the road, anywhere but directly at the truth forming around him. And the two Marines remain composed, their posture unchanged, one speaking quietly into a radio, the other watching with calm precision, not hostility, not judgment, just presence. And that presence alone is enough to hold the moment steady. And through the diner window, Emily watches for a second longer before stepping outside, the bell chiming softly behind her, the sound almost ceremonial now, marking a transition more than an exit, and the German shepherd moves beside her in perfect silence, each step measured, aligned, as if they have walked this path before, many times, in places far less forgiving than a small roadside diner. And when she reaches the edge of the pavement, she stops, not too close, not too far, just enough to be heard without raising her voice. "You asked me who you were dealing with," she says, and the man turns, slower this time, the last fragments of his earlier certainty fading into something quieter, something closer to unease, and she does not step forward, does not close the distance, because she does not need to. The distance itself now belongs to her, and she continues, her voice even, steady. "For weeks, you walked into that place thinking no one noticed, that everything you said, everything you did, stayed small." And the man's brow tightens, confusion mixing with realization, because pieces are beginning to connect in ways he cannot stop, and one of the Marines lowers his radio, giving a slight nod, confirming something unspoken, and Emily's gaze does not waver. "But some things do not stay small," she adds quietly, and the dog beside her shifts his weight just slightly, not tension, not threat, just awareness. The kind that reads a room before anyone else understands it, and the man exhales, longer this time, his shoulders dropping a fraction, as if the effort of holding on to what he thought he controlled has finally become too heavy. "You set me up," he says, not accusing, not fully, more like stating something he wishes were not true, and Emily considers the words for a moment, her eyes softening just enough to show that this was never about trickery, never about winning, and when she answers, it is almost gentle. "No," she says, "you walked into this on your own." And the simplicity of it lands harder than anything else, because there is no escape in it, no angle to argue, only the quiet weight of consequence unfolding exactly as it was always going to. And the wind moves lightly across the parking lot, carrying with it the distant sound of traffic, of ordinary life continuing just beyond this moment. And for a brief second, everything feels still again, like the pause before a final understanding settles in, and Emily reaches down, her fingers brushing against the dog's collar, tracing the edge of a worn tag that catches the last light of the day, a small piece of metal carrying a story far older than this moment, far deeper than the man in front of her could ever see. And she lifts her eyes once more, not with anger, not with triumph, but with something steadier, something earned. And the silence that follows is not empty. It is complete, as if the truth has finally arrived and no longer needs to be spoken aloud. The last light of the evening stretches long across the pavement, turning everything softer, quieter, as if the world itself is choosing not to interrupt what has already been decided. And the man stands there with nothing left to say, his earlier confidence now a distant memory, replaced by something heavier, something closer to understanding, and the Marines remain beside him, not pressing, not rushing, simply allowing the moment to settle the way it needs to, while Emily watches with a calm that does not come from winning, but from knowing that this was never a fight to begin with. And the German shepherd at her side shifts slightly, leaning just enough into her leg to remind her he is there, present, steady, the same way he has always been. And for a brief second, her hand rests against his head, fingers tracing a familiar path, grounding herself in something that does not change, something that never left. And the man exhales again, slower this time, as if letting go of the last illusion he had been holding on to. "I did not think anyone was paying attention," he admits quietly, the words falling without resistance, and Emily's gaze softens, not in forgiveness, but in recognition, because she has heard that before, in different places, in different forms. Always the same belief that silence means invisibility, that quiet means weakness, and she takes a small step forward, not closing the distance entirely, just enough to meet him where he stands now, not above, not below, but equal in the truth that has finally surfaced. People always think that, she says, her voice low, steady, until someone does, and the simplicity of it lingers in the air, carried by the faint evening breeze, and one of the Marines nods slightly, a signal exchanged without words, and the moment begins to move again, slow but certain, like a tide that has already turned, and the man does not resist this time, does not argue, does not try to reclaim anything, because there is nothing left to reclaim, only the quiet acceptance of what follows next. And as he is guided toward the waiting vehicle at the far end of the lot, the sound of distant traffic hums steadily, grounding the scene back into the ordinary world, the one that keeps moving no matter what stories unfold within it. And Emily remains where she is, watching for a second longer, not out of attachment, not out of doubt, but because endings deserve to be witnessed, even the quiet ones. And when the car door closes and the engine starts, she finally turns away, the weight she carried for so long no longer pressing against her shoulders in the same way, lighter now, though not gone, never fully gone, but changed, and the German Shepherd walks beside her as she heads back toward the diner, the bell above the door ringing once more as she steps inside, and the warmth of the room greets her again, familiar, steady, unchanged in all the ways that matter. And yet something is different, something subtle, something only she can feel, as she pauses for just a moment, her hand brushing lightly against the worn tag at her collar. And in that small, quiet gesture, there is a story still unfolding, one that did not end out there in the parking lot, but has only just begun to reveal what it has been carrying all along. The diner settles back into its rhythm, but not completely, because something lingers in the air like the faint echo of a note that has not fully faded. And Emily moves behind the counter with the same quiet efficiency as before, pouring coffee, wiping down surfaces, responding when spoken to. Yet there is a subtle shift in the way people look at her now, not with curiosity, not with fear, but with a kind of quiet respect that does not ask questions, and she does not acknowledge it, not directly, because attention has never been what she wanted, only truth. And the German Shepherd rests near the corner of the room, head up, eyes alert but calm, watching the door, the windows, the space between people, always aware, always present, and every now and then, his gaze returns to her, just for a second, as if checking, confirming, staying connected in a way that does not require words. And outside, the sky deepens into evening, the last gold giving way to a cooler blue, and the hum of passing cars becomes steadier, more distant, blending into the background of a world that continues without pause. And a man at the counter clears his throat, hesitant, unsure if he should speak, and when he finally does, his voice is softer than expected. "Ma'am, are you all right?" And Emily pauses, just for a fraction of a second, the question simple but carrying more weight than it seems, and she considers it, not as something to answer quickly, but as something to feel, to measure against everything that has just unfolded. And then she nods once, small, certain. "Yes," she says, and the word is not dramatic, not emphasized, but it is real, grounded. The kind of answer that comes from somewhere deeper than the moment itself. And the man nods back, satisfied, not needing anything more. Because sometimes the simplest truths are the ones that settle the heaviest questions. And Emily turns slightly, her hand brushing again against the chain at her collar, the metal tag resting there catching a faint glint from the overhead light. And for a brief moment, her fingers linger on it, not as a habit, but as a connection, something that anchors her across time, across absence, across everything that has been lost and everything that still remains. And her eyes lower, not in sadness, but in remembrance, quiet and steady, and the dog rises slowly from his place, moving toward her without urgency, his steps measured, familiar, until he stands beside her once more, close enough that she can feel the warmth of him, the steady rhythm of breath, the presence that never left even when everything else did. And she exhales softly, a breath that carries something unspoken, something released, And when she opens her eyes again, there is clarity. There, not the kind that comes from answers, but the kind that comes from acceptance. And the world around her continues. Orders called out, dishes clinking, conversations rising and falling. But she moves through it differently now. Lighter, not because the past has changed, but because it has finally been faced. And as the door opens once more, letting in a brief gust of cool night air, she does not look up right away, because she already knows that whatever comes next, she will meet it the same way she met everything else, quietly, steadily, and on her own terms. The night settles fully now, wrapping the diner in a softer kind of quiet, the kind that feels earned rather than empty, and the overhead lights hum faintly as Emily moves through the space with the same steady rhythm. But there is something new beneath it, something lighter in the way her shoulders carry themselves, as if a weight she never spoke about has shifted just enough to let her breathe differently. And the German shepherd remains close, no longer scanning every corner with the same intensity, but still aware, still present. His loyalty not loud, not dramatic, just constant, like a heartbeat you only notice when you stop to listen. And a few customers linger longer than usual, not because they need anything, but because something about the place feels different now, safer in a way they cannot quite explain. And one older woman near the window watches Emily for a moment before offering a small, knowing smile, the kind that does not ask questions but understands more than it says, and Emily returns it gently. A brief exchange that passes like a quiet acknowledgement between two people who have both carried things. In silence. And outside, the parking lot sits still under the glow of a single flickering light, the earlier tension now gone, replaced by the ordinary stillness of a small-town evening. And yet the air feels changed, as if something invisible has been cleared away, leaving space for something else to take its place. And Emily pauses near the counter, her hand resting once more against the chain at her collar, her fingers finding the worn edges of the tag without looking, tracing its surface with familiarity. And for a moment, her eyes close, not in sorrow, but in something deeper, something closer to connection, as if distance does not matter when memory is held this close. And the dog shifts beside her, leaning just slightly into her leg, grounding her in the present, reminding her that not everything belongs to the past. And she exhales slowly, a breath that carries both endings and beginnings at once. And when she opens her eyes again, there is a quiet resolve there, something settled, something steady. And the door opens again with a soft chime, a new customer stepping in, unaware of what this place held just hours ago, unaware of the shift that has already taken root. And Emily turns toward them with the same calm presence, ready, not guarded, not closed, but open in a way that does not compromise who she is. And as she moves forward, the dog follows without command, without hesitation, their steps aligned, their silence shared. And in that quiet partnership, there is something unmistakable, not just survival, not just resilience, but a kind of grace that does not announce itself, does not demand to be seen, yet changes everything it touches. And somewhere, beyond the walls of the diner, beyond the reach of headlights and passing cars, the story continues to unfold, not in noise, not in spectacle, but in the quiet spaces where truth settles and something unseen chooses, finally, to stay. Hours pass without anyone noticing the exact moment the night fully takes hold, because inside the diner, time moves differently, measured not by clocks but by the quiet rhythm of small actions, refilling cups, clearing plates, the soft murmur of voices blending into something almost comforting. And Emily continues her work with that same steady presence. But there is a subtle awareness now, a heightened clarity in the way she observes the room, not out of fear, but out of habit, the kind that never fully leaves once it has been learned. And the German shepherd remains close, resting but never truly asleep, his ears catching the smallest shifts, his eyes opening briefly whenever the door chimes, then settling again when nothing follows. And at one point, the older woman by the window rises to leave, pausing just long enough to place a few bills on the table before walking toward the counter, her steps slow but certain. And when she reaches Emily, she does not speak right away. She simply looks at her, really looks, as if trying to understand something that cannot be explained with words. And then she says quietly, You carry yourself like someone who has already seen the worst and decided to keep going anyway. And the sentence lands softly, without weight or pressure, just an observation offered with care, and Emily meets her gaze, holding it for a moment, not defensive, not surprised, just present. And then she gives a small nod, acknowledging the truth without needing to elaborate, because some things do not need to be spoken to be understood, and the woman smiles faintly before turning to leave, the bell above the door chiming once more as cool night air slips briefly inside. And for a second, Emily watches the empty doorway after it closes, her thoughts drifting somewhere quieter, somewhere deeper, and her fingers find the tag at her collar again, tracing its edges with a familiarity that feels almost like memory itself. And in that small gesture, there is a story still unfolding, one that does not stay locked in the past but moves with her, breath by breath, step by step, and the dog rises again, moving closer until he stands beside her, his presence grounding, steady, as if he understands without needing to be told, and she exhales softly, the kind of breath that releases something unseen, something that has been held too long. And when she turns back to the counter, there is a quiet resolve in her movements, something more certain, more anchored, as if whatever was unfinished before has finally begun to settle into place. And outside, the parking lot remains still, but the world beyond it continues, headlights passing in the distance, unseen lives moving forward, unaware of the quiet shift that has taken place here. And yet, in the small space of this diner, something has changed in a way that cannot be undone, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quiet way that truth settles when it is finally allowed to stand. And as another customer steps in, the bell marking yet another beginning, Emily lifts her gaze, ready, not because she has to be, but because she chooses to be, and beside her, the dog remains, unwavering, a silent witness to everything that has been and everything still to come. It is close to closing time when the rhythm of the diner slows again, not from tension this time, but from something quieter, something reflective, as if the walls themselves are holding on to what happened and turning it over gently. And Emily moves through the final tasks of the night with a calm that feels different now, not just practiced, but earned, her hands steady as she wipes down the counter, aligns the chairs, checks the register, small actions that bring order back to a place that briefly held something far heavier than routine. And the German Shepherd follows her without command, pacing slowly beside her, pausing when she pauses, watching when she watches, a silent partnership shaped by time and trust. And when the last customer leaves, the bell above the door giving one final soft chime, the diner falls into a deeper stillness, the kind that only comes when a day has fully run its course, and Emily reaches up to switch off half the lights, leaving the room bathed in a softer glow, shadows stretching longer across the floor, and for a moment, she simply stands there, looking at the empty space, the quiet tables, the place where everything shifted, and her gaze drifts to the window, where the reflection of the room blends with the darkness outside, creating something almost layered, past and present folding into one another. And her hand rises again, almost without thought, fingers brushing against the tag at her collar, the metal cool against her skin, worn smooth in places from years of being held. And this time, she does not just touch it, she holds it, steady, as if anchoring herself to something beyond the room, beyond the night, and her voice, when it comes, is barely above a whisper, not meant for anyone else. "We did it," she says softly, the words simple, but carrying a weight that stretches far beyond the moment. And the dog steps closer, pressing gently against her side, his presence answering in the only way he knows how. And she closes her eyes for a second, letting the quiet settle around her, not empty, but full of memory, of loss, of something that never fully left. And when she opens them again, there is a shift, subtle but unmistakable, as if something long unresolved has finally found its place, not erased, not forgotten, but understood. And she exhales slowly, releasing a breath that feels different from all the others, lighter, steadier, and she lets the tag fall back against her chest, the faint sound of metal against fabric barely audible in the stillness. And then she moves again, reaching for her coat, slipping it on with the same quiet efficiency, the dog already waiting by the door, knowing without being told that it is time. And when she turns off the last light, the diner fades into darkness behind her, the door opening with a soft creak. The cool night air wrapping around them as they step outside, and the world feels wider now, not because it has changed, but because she has. And as they walk into the quiet street, side by side, there is no rush, no urgency, just a steady forward motion, the kind that comes from knowing that whatever comes next, it will be met the same way everything else was, with silence, with strength, and with something that does not need to be seen to be real. The street stretches quiet under the dim glow of aging streetlights, the kind that hum faintly as they flicker against the dark, and Emily walks at an unhurried pace, her boots making soft, measured sounds against the pavement, the rhythm steady, almost meditative, while beside her, the German shepherd moves in perfect alignment, his presence not just beside her, but with her, as if each step is shared rather than taken alone. And the air carries a light chill now, brushing against her face, carrying the faint scent of asphalt and distant pine, grounding her in a world that feels both familiar and newly opened at the same time. And for a while, neither of them moves with urgency, because there is no need to rush when the weight of the past has finally shifted enough to allow space for something else to exist. And as they reach the edge of a quiet intersection, Emily slows, her gaze lifting slightly toward the horizon where the last traces of light have long since disappeared, leaving only the deep blue of night stretching endlessly above. And she pauses there, just for a moment, as if listening to something that cannot be heard, something internal, something that has been quiet for a long time and is only now beginning to speak again. And her hand rises once more, fingers brushing the familiar edge of the tag at her collar. But this time, the gesture feels different, not anchored in memory alone, but in something that connects memory to the present, something that no longer pulls her backward, but steadies her where she stands. And the dog shifts slightly closer, his shoulder brushing against her leg, a silent reassurance, a constant presence that does not ask questions and does not need answers. And she exhales slowly, her breath visible for just a second in the cool air. And when she speaks, her voice is soft but certain. "We are still here." And the words are not directed at the dog, not entirely. They are spoken into the space around her, into the night, into everything that once felt uncertain and now feels settled, not perfect, not complete, but steady enough to move forward. And they continue walking, turning down a quieter road lined with small houses, most of them dark, their windows reflecting the faint glow of passing headlights in the distance. And the world feels quieter here, more intimate, as if each step carries them further away from what was and closer to what can be. And Emily's posture remains relaxed, her movements unforced, the kind of calm that does not come from forgetting, but from accepting. And as they approach a modest house set slightly back from the road, she slows again, her gaze settling on it with a quiet familiarity, not just a place, but something more, something that has held her through nights far heavier than this one. And when she reaches the door, she pauses, her hand resting lightly against the handle, not opening it right away, but standing there for a second longer, as if acknowledging the threshold between what has been carried and what is about to begin. And the dog waits beside her, patient, unwavering. And in that stillness, there is no tension, no fear, only a quiet understanding that whatever lies beyond that door, it will be met the same way everything else has been, not with noise, not with force, but with a strength that does not need to prove itself. And when she finally turns the handle and steps inside, the night remains outside, but something of it, something calm and steady, follows her in. The house greets her with a quiet that feels different from the diner, deeper, more personal, the kind of silence that does not come from absence, but from memory held carefully in place. And Emily steps inside, slowly, closing the door behind her with a soft click that seems to seal the outside world away, while the German shepherd moves ahead a few steps, then pauses, turning back to make sure she is still there, a habit formed long ago, one that has never needed to change. And the faint scent of wood and old coffee lingers in the air, familiar, grounding, wrapping around her like something known, something steady. And she reaches to switch on a small lamp near the entryway, the warm light spilling gently across the room, revealing simple furniture, clean, lived in, nothing excessive, nothing wasted, just enough to hold a life that has learned to carry only what matters. And she sets her keys down on a narrow table, the soft clink of metal echoing briefly before fading into the quiet. And for a moment, she does not move any further. She just stands there, letting the stillness settle, letting the shift from outside to inside complete itself, and her hand rises once more, almost instinctively, fingers finding the tag at her collar, holding it a little longer this time, as if something in this space allows her to feel it more clearly, and her eyes drift across the room until they rest on a framed photograph sitting on a shelf, simple, unassuming, but placed with intention, and she walks toward it slowly, each step measured, not hesitant, but careful, as if approaching something sacred. And when she reaches it, she pauses, her gaze softening as she looks at the image. A man in uniform, standing beside a younger version of the same German shepherd now resting near her feet, both of them caught in a moment that feels almost alive even now. And she does not speak right away, because some words are not meant to be rushed, some moments are not meant to be filled, and the dog moves closer, sitting beside her, his eyes lifting toward the photograph for a brief second before returning to her, as if he understands, as if he remembers in his own way. And Emily exhales, slowly, the breath carrying something deeper than the night, something that has traveled with her through every step of this journey. And when she finally speaks, her voice is soft, steady. "It is done," she says. The words simple, but filled with a quiet finality that does not need explanation, and she reaches out, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the frame, not clinging, not holding on, just acknowledging, just connecting. And in that small gesture, there is no desperation, no unfinished pain, only a quiet sense of completion, as if something that has been waiting has finally been allowed to rest. And she lowers her hand, stepping back slightly, her posture straight, her breathing even. And the room seems to hold that moment with her, not changing it, not interrupting it, just allowing it to exist exactly as it is. And the dog leans gently against her leg once more, grounding her in the present, reminding her that while some things have ended, others remain, steady, constant. And she turns away from the photograph, not because it no longer matters, but because it no longer needs to be faced the same way. And as she moves deeper into the house, there is a quiet certainty in her steps, a sense that whatever comes next will not be shaped by what was, but by what she chooses now. And in the soft glow of the lamp, the room feels less like a place of memory and more like a place of continuation, where silence is not empty, but full of something finally at peace. The house grows quieter as the night deepens, not in a way that feels empty, but in a way that feels complete, like a long conversation that has finally reached its natural end. And Emily moves through the space with slow, deliberate steps, not out of hesitation, but out of awareness, as if she is noticing things she has not allowed herself to notice before. The soft creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the next room, the way the lamplight settles into corners and lingers there, gentle and steady. And the German shepherd follows at a distance now, not because he needs to stay close, but because he knows she no longer needs him to, not in the same way. And yet he remains, because loyalty does not leave when it is no longer required. It stays because it chooses to. And Emily pauses near the window, her hand resting lightly against the glass, feeling the coolness of it, grounding herself in something physical, something present. And outside, the night stretches wide and quiet, the street empty, the world moving somewhere beyond her reach. And for the first time in a long while, she does not feel the need to watch it, to measure it, to anticipate what might come from it. She simply observes, and that is enough. And her hand lowers slowly, her fingers brushing once more against the tag at her collar. But this time she does not hold it. She lets it rest where it belongs, no longer needing to grasp it to feel connected. And she turns away from the window, moving toward the small kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water, the sound simple, ordinary, yet carrying a quiet sense of return, as if she is stepping back into a life that has been waiting for her to fully arrive. And she takes a slow sip, the coolness steady, real, grounding her in the present in a way that nothing else quite can. And the dog settles down nearby, his body relaxed, his breathing even, The kind of rest that only comes when everything that needed to be watched has finally been seen. And Emily leans lightly against the counter, her gaze drifting again, not toward the photograph this time, not toward the past, but toward the open space in front of her. And there is something different in the way she stands now, something unburdened, not because the past has disappeared, but because it has found its place. No longer pressing forward, no longer demanding to be carried in the same way. And she closes her eyes for a brief moment, not to escape, but to settle into that feeling, to let it root itself quietly. And when she opens them again, there is a calm there that feels complete, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just steady. And she sets the glass down, the soft sound marking a small, almost invisible shift, and she moves toward the hallway, pausing briefly as she passes the photograph once more. But this time, she does not stop, she does not linger. She simply acknowledges it with the slightest tilt of her head, a silent understanding passing between what was and what is, and then she continues forward, her steps sure, her presence grounded, and the house, once filled with echoes of memory, now holds something else entirely, something quieter, something stronger, something that does not need to be spoken to be real. And as the light dims behind her and the night settles fully around the walls, there is a sense, subtle but undeniable, that this is not an ending, but a beginning shaped not by loss, but by what remains when everything else has finally been faced. Morning arrives quietly, not with urgency, but with a slow unfolding of light that slips gently through the curtains, laying soft patterns across the floor, and Emily stands in the doorway of the kitchen, a warm cup held between her hands, watching as the world outside begins again, unchanged, and yet somehow different. And the German shepherd rests near the window, his eyes half open, aware but calm, no longer scanning for what might go wrong, only present in what is, and the house feels lighter now, not because anything has been removed, but because something has been settled, something that no longer needs to be carried the same way. And Emily takes a slow sip, the warmth grounding her, steady, real, and for a moment, she simply stands there, breathing in the quiet, allowing it to exist without needing to fill it, and her gaze drifts toward the photograph across the room. And this time, she does not feel pulled toward it. She does not feel the weight of it calling her back. Instead, it sits where it belongs, part of the story, not the center of it, and she nods slightly, a small, almost imperceptible acknowledgement, as if something unspoken has finally been understood between what was and what remains. And the dog rises then, stretching slowly, walking over to her side with the same quiet loyalty, and she reaches down, her hand resting on his head, fingers moving through his fur with familiarity, not as reassurance, but as connection, something shared, something constant. And she exhales softly, a breath that carries no tension now, only presence. And outside, the sound of a passing car drifts by, distant, ordinary, the world continuing as it always does. And Emily sets her cup down on the counter, the soft sound marking the beginning of something small but certain, and she moves toward the door, pausing only briefly to grab her jacket, her movement steady, unhurried. And when she opens the door, the morning air greets her, cool and fresh, carrying the quiet promise of a new day. And she steps outside with the dog beside her, their pace aligned, their presence grounded, and there is no dramatic shift, no grand declaration, only a quiet understanding that what needed to be faced has been faced, what needed to be seen has been seen, and what remains is not empty, but full of possibility, of continuation, of something that does not need to be loud to be real. And as they walk down the path, the sunlight catching briefly on the metal tag at her collar, there is a sense, subtle but undeniable, that some stories do not end in victory. They end in something quieter, something steadier, something closer to grace. And in that quiet, life does not pause. It moves forward, one step at a time, carried not by what was lost, but by what still chooses to stay.